Alright, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to today's video. Today, we're going to be testing your knowledge of American history, and mine too. Today we're just going to be going through and playing some trivia. We're going to have a little bit of fun. I haven't done any history game type videos in a while, and I think it's fun to test our knowledge on this kind of stuff. This year is obviously the 250th anniversary of the country. It's 2026 right now, if you're watching this when it comes out, but you can certainly watch this at any point. But we're going to this is the first in a series of videos where I'm going to be diving into American history to kind of celebrate for the 250th anniversary. So if you're interested in stuff like that, be sure to smash the like button for more content like that. I have a lot of videos on not just U.S. history, but history from all different areas of the world. And I plan on making even more in areas that we haven't really focused on too much. I'm in my college dorm right now, guys, so this is what's going on here. I've run out of a lot of on-site videos to post, but those will be coming more. We're just hit a big snowstorm that's been covering the ground the last 2 or 3 weeks now, so yeah, bear with us. I'm kind of just doing some videos in here, but we're going to be looking at 3 different quizzes, and they're going to be a lot. We're going to go through a lot of questions today, over 100. So this is, we're going to start off here with the ultimate American history quiz. And we're going to test my knowledge, see if I know everything. I highly doubt I will get all of them right, but I hope I get most of them right, because I've been studying American history pretty actively for the last 5 years now. So, 2021 is pretty much when I started making content on this channel for history. But, for about 5 years. So hopefully I'm able to figure this out. That is loud. So this is the ultimate American history quiz. We have 40 questions.
Welcome, everyone.
Looks like there's 3 choices per.
Today we're diving into a fast, fun American history quiz.
Also, I'm going to post the links in the description if you want to watch them yourself.
Founding ideals to modern milestones.
So let's see what happens. You guys can play at home too, obviously.
Like and subscribe and share this with friends to challenge them too.
Ooh, I challenge you viewers.
Who was the first U.S. president?
I was going to say, watch me miss the first one. That'd be pretty embarrassing. All right, well, I think we all know this one, George Washington.
Here are your choices. A, George Washington. B,
we can
John
turn off
Adams.
the volume. It's
C,
all right. We don't need to listen
Thomas
to her
Jefferson.
voice, although it is lovely.
Reflect on this
listen to
question.
the voice. So we got George Washington, obviously the first president. He's the commander-in-chief during the American Revolution. Another reason I like to do a video like this is to kind of give you guys a little more depth about each of these questions, kind of go into a different topic. But yeah, this is pretty straightforward. Washington's the commander-in-chief of the Continental Army during the Revolution, which was the war of U.S. independence against Britain. And he's pretty much unanimously elected as the first president. Although we don't get the first president until 1789, which is about 6 years after the Treaty of Paris is signed, because we're under the Articles of Confederation for a little bit. And then the Constitution comes on. Once all the states ratify it, they elect the first president, which is George Washington.
That's the end of this question. A, George Washington.
So we got that one correct. Looks like it turned green. All right, which city hosted the Constitutional Convention in 1787? That's going to be Philadelphia.
Which city hosted the Constitutional Convention in 1787?
Hopefully.
Here are your choices. A, Boston.
Pretty famous as well. A lot of the founding documents were written in Philadelphia. It's in Pennsylvania. Hopefully it's right.
B,
it is.
Philadelphia.
The other options were Boston and New York, which both played huge parts in the Revolution. New York was actually the first capital of the United States. George Washington was sworn in New York City, actually, before D.C. was built. And then Boston, obviously, you get the Boston Tea Party, the Boston Massacre, and really the revolution starts in Massachusetts. So
on to the next
all
question.
Very influential cities in the early part of
Which
U.S. history. Which purchase doubled the United States in 1803? So we have 3 major purchases here. That is obviously the Louisiana Purchase. That was issued by Thomas Jefferson. One of the biggest steals. Napoleon sold it to us. It was owned by France at the time. France had controlled a lot of North America, and then they lost to the British during the French and Indian War, and then they got some of that land back. But Napoleon was doing things over in Europe at the time and needed the money. So, and he didn't really have much care for American land. So he sold it to Thomas Jefferson for a bargain. I don't remember the exact price, but it was like a few cents an acre. It was even for 1803, it was not that much money. for that amount of land. And there were some questionable things whether or not that was constitutional or not for Jefferson to be able to do that, because there's not really anything in the Constitution that says you can expand the territory of the United States, but Jefferson did it anyway. He was kind of like on the boat of like, well, the Constitution, it doesn't say I can, but it doesn't say I can't, so I'll do it. So that's kind of what happened with that. But it's Louisiana Purchase. The Gadsden Purchase was made in the 1850s by Franklin Pierce. That got some areas in Arizona and New Mexico. And Alaska Purchase was in 1867 with Russia. The Gadsden Purchase. The War of 1812 was fought mainly against which country? That's going to be the British. Great Britain. Although the Native Americans were also involved in that conflict. But the Native Americans were also involved in that conflict.
Great Britain was the right answer. Hope you got it.
On the British side. Enemy of my enemy is my friend. Next up we have, what river did George Washington cross on freezing night in 1776? That is the Delaware River. The famous portrait of him crossing the Delaware River. And then they fought the next morning. This was on Christmas Eve of 1776, actually. The following morning, they fought the Hessian army at the Battle of Trenton, which is my favorite battle. My name's Trenton, that's why. But the Hessians were a German force. And that was one of the first major victories for Washington in the war. Washington was not a great commander on the battlefield. He had good leadership qualities, but the Battle of Trenton was a battle that was needed to win, and that was one of the few victories he had, especially early on. This video is probably going to be pretty long, too, so you guys can skip around if you want to. Who delivered the Gettysburg Address? Well, that's going to be Abraham Lincoln. I actually sang the Gettysburg Address at a talent show when I was in high school. So it's on the channel if you guys want to check that out.
Reflect on this question.
I did that about 2 years ago, 2024. Frederick Douglass was a famous abolitionist, and Grant was general during the Civil War.
Gave women the right to vote.
Which amendment gave the women the right to vote in 1920? That is going to be the 19th Amendment. The 14th Amendment is having to do with legal citizenship, birthright citizenship. And then the 21st Amendment, that's one of the Reconstruction Amendment. The 21st Amendment is repealing the 18th, legalizing alcohol. The main goal of the Lewis and Clark expedition was to find a route to the Pacific. I think is my answer. That's kind of up for debate. Build frontier forts. They didn't really build any forts on the frontier, and it was not to mine gold in California because they didn't really know that was there yet. Lewis and Clark were sent by Jefferson in the early 1800s. And they were the first people to reach the Pacific. I'm going to go with the Seneca Falls Convention. Now, I don't know too much about it, but I know that it was significant in women's history. And women also were a big thing early on in the 20th century. I believe the Seneca Falls Convention was in the 1800s, but don't quote me on that. But the in the early 20th century, women were a big advocate for progressive reform and prohibition as well, which is very interesting. The Homestead Act was in the 1860s. That was signed by Lincoln for westward expansion. So it's not that either. Seneca Falls Convention. I've gotten them all right so far. I'm halfway. I'm almost 50%. Which battle is often called the turning point of the Revolution? Now, I've heard two turning points. Thankfully, the other answer's not on there. The Battle of Trenton, which we talked about earlier, is considered a turning point, but typically it's the Battle of Saratoga. Yorktown was the end of the war, and Bunker Hill was the beginning of the war.
Take a moment to think about it.
So it's neither of those two, so it's going to be Saratoga. Yorktown was the surrender of Cornwallis in 1781. What did the Emancipation Proclamation do in 1863? That it freed slave people in the Confederacy. That was during the Civil War. The original war aim of the Civil War was to bring back the states that had seceded from the Union. Slavery was legal in the South, and they were afraid when Lincoln got elected that he was going to end slavery, so they all seceded. There's about 11 states that were in the Confederacy. So Lincoln signs an act in the middle of the war saying, we're going to free all enslaved people in the Confederacy. And Lincoln had the right to do that because the United States government never recognized the Confederacy as its own country. Ever. It was states in rebellion, simply. So In doing that, it kind of changed the war aim from let's bring these states back, let's preserve the Union, to let's end slavery. So that was a big deal. But the Civil War was not originally to end slavery. Yes, slavery had a big idea. It was a big concept in starting the war, but it wasn't the thing we were fighting for originally. Who is the main author of the Bill of Rights? So that's going to be
Alexander Hamilton.
It's going to be James Madison. That was 1791. I hope it's James Madison. I think it is. So the Bill of Rights comes along because you have two real political factions during this time, the Federalists and the Anti-Federalists. The Anti-Federalists want more power for the states, whereas the Federalists want more power for the central government. And so Anti-Federalists, like guys like Thomas Jefferson, for example, and James Madison are afraid that the Constitution is going to be too powerful, the federal government is going to be too powerful, and that the states and the people aren't going to have rights, and that the federal government is going to be too powerful. So in compromise, Madison writes the Bill of Rights, which are the first 10 amendments. And there's 26. There's 27 today. So
let's continue.
They keep adding amendments
13.
to the Constitution,
The
changes to it. The
Transcontinental
Transcontinental Railroad was completed
Here are
in,
your choices.
I think, 1869.
A.
I'm actually taking a class at college right now, U.S. History Survey, since 1865. We just talked about the
1850.
Transcontinental Railroad
B. 1903.
like today, and yet
C.
in Wednesday. So it's
1869.
1869.
Give
That's
yourself
fresh in my
time
mind.
to answer.
And that's
And there
post-Civil
you
War.
have it.
Yep. Yeah, westward
1869 is
expansion. So
correct.
that was a huge deal.
Question 14.
Huge deal, especially during the
The
Gilded
Boston
Age
Tea
period.
Party.
The Boston
against-
Tea Party was
Here are
a
your
protest against,
choices.
that's going to be taxes
A.
on tea,
Taxes
obviously.
on tea.
All right, what
15.
event is widely
What
seen as
event
the
is
start of the Great
widely
Depression? Well, that's
seen
going to be
as
the
the
stock
start of
market
the
crash
Great
in
Depression?
1929. The Great
End of World
Depression
War I.
happened a little
Stock
later than the
market
end of World
crash
War
of
One. The New Deal
1929.
was in response to the Great Depression.
Deal
It was
laws.
not what caused
Give
it.
it some-
It was policy
the end of
initiated
this
about 4
question.
years after
B.
the stock. So you get the
29
roaring
was
20s
correct.
and then
Question 16.
prosperity,
Who
and
was
then it
US
just drops.
president?
So
World
who
War
was
II?
U.S. president for
Here are your
most of World War
choices.
II? That is going to be
A.
Franklin
Harry S.
Roosevelt.
Truman.
Truman was
Franklin D.
president at the
Roosevelt.
very end.
C.
Roosevelt dies in
Dwight D.
April of
Eisenhower.
1945, and then you get
Think this
Truman
one
at the
through.
end, who infamously drops the bombs,
The
the nuclear
correct
bombs
choice
on
was
Japan.
Roosevelt.
Roosevelt is president
for
for,
the next
most of the
one?
war. He's actually the longest
Question
serving president in
17.
U.S. history, 12 years.
Which
And then
state?
Which
No.
state joined
Here are
was the
your
last to
choices.
join the Union in
A.
1959?
Alaska.
That's going to be
B.
Hawaii. Alaska was
Reflect on
also
this
admitted that
question.
year. Fun fact, Marlene Seibert, if you're
And the
watching this right
answer
now,
is
my
B,
grandmother was
Hawaii.
actually born the exact
Keep it up.
same day and year Hawaii became a state. August 21st, 1959, which is the last time we had a new state. New Mexico, I believe, was the 47th state. I think 1907 or something like that.
Question
Arizona
18.
was the 48th, I know.
Nine.
Or Oklahoma was around there,
Here are
too.
your
What was Apollo 11
A.
known for in
First American
1969? First moon landing.
C.
Apollo program was
First
established
moon landing. Take a
in
second
the
to decide.
1960s to send man to the moon, which really
Let's see.
put us on the top
C.
space race against the Soviet Union in the Cold War. Actually, fun fact, just in a few days, they were launching, the U.S. is launching a second mission to the moon for the first since 1970s, Artemis 2. And they're sending an orbit to the moon, and then next year, in 2027, they're planning on doing a Artemis 3 and actually having the first land mission on the moon since 1972.
First moon landing is
So,
correct.
really,
Moving
I mean,
on.
this period was
Question
like the
19.
only time we
Which
ever really
Supreme
went.
Court
And then the
legal
space
school
race ended shortly after
segregation
that.
in
Which Supreme Court
1954?
case ended
Here are your
legal
choices.
school segregation in
A.
1954? That's going to be
Brown
Brown
versus
versus
Board of
Board of Education.
B.
It's in
Plessy
Topeka,
versus
Kansas.
Ferguson. C.
Plessy versus
Miranda
Ferguson
versus
was a
Arizona.
case
Take a moment to think about
that
it.
had to do with African American rights,
up.
the
The
one
correct
drop policy or whatever. Some guy with a train kind of thing, and that's in the 1890s, which is kind of a kind of sets the precedent for a while post Civil War. And then Miranda versus Arizona was something having to do with the right of interrogation or something like that. I think
Answer is
believe it was. I don't know too much about
Nice
that, but I know
try.
it had something to do with
Question
the Fourth
20.
Amendment or something like
Which
that.
new
Right to
program
interrogation. Fifth Amendment, I guess. Which New Deal program built dams and brought power to the South? Okay. I'm going to go with the
Brought power to the
WPA,
South.
but I'm not actually
Here are
100%
your
sure on this.
choices.
I'm not too good
A.
with the New Deal
Peace
program.
Corps
There's a
B.
lot
Tennessee
with it
Valley
since during the
Authority.
Depression. I'm
C.
going to go with the
Works
WPA, but it
Progress
might not be.
Administration.
It's
Your
maybe the
answer
first one I
carefully.
miss. Tennessee Valley Authority. Okay. TVA. That's the first one I missed. I almost got a perfect score on the first quiz. Dang it. Yeah, the New Deal. Yeah, that's unfortunate. That's okay though. New Deal is one of those things I don't know too much about all this different programs. I know a lot about the. I'm sure some of you guys in the comments beat me to that one. It's all right though. We're gonna move on to the next quiz. So this one is 50 U.S. history. This one is called 50 tough trivia questions. So that last quiz was pretty easy for me for the most part. So we're gonna get something a little more challenging. We might see repeat questions. There's going to be one more quiz after this, so we'll just let this go.
Welcome
15
to
minutes.
quiz. You will have a mere 10 seconds to answer
10
each
seconds
question. So
answer
be
each
quick
question.
and accurate. Are you ready to dive into the rich and diverse history of the United States?
I am.
Let's begin.
Let's go, America. All right. What year was the Declaration of Independence adopted? That's going to be 1776. 250 years ago this year, July 4th. Well, that wasn't really officially ended signed until August 2nd. So, fun fact. Turn this down. Who wrote the Declaration of Independence? Well, he's right there. Thomas Jefferson. I'll probably turn this down so you guys can hear my voice. The music's kind of distracting. Yeah, Thomas Jefferson. Third president, first secretary of state, and second vice president. Interesting. First, second, third. First secretary of state, second vice president, third president. Which war was fought between the North and the South of the United States from 1861 to 1865? Well, that's going to be the old American Civil War. Deadliest conflict the U.S. has ever faced. 600,000 people died. Probably closer to 1 million if you count the disease and injury deaths the decades after the war. Who assassinated President Lincoln in 1865? That's John Wilkes Booth. He was from Maryland. He was an actor, famous brother of a famous actor. And probably the most sophisticated of the assassins and presidents. Which event marked the beginning of the Great Depression? That's the stock market crash in 1929. We actually had that question in the last quiz, so we already know that one. October 29th, 1929, Black Tuesday. Who is the primary author of the U.S. Constitution? Well, it's actually George Washington, but they might put Madison. Because Madison is known as the father of the Constitution because he came up with a lot of the ideals that are in the Constitution. But Washington actually wrote most, if not all of it. So it could be either one, but Washington's the correct answer. They might say Madison. Madison did not write most of the Constitution. But people give him credit for being the father of the Constitution. So that counts. What document guaranteed certain individual rights and freedoms in the United States? That is the guaranteed certain individual rights. Well, it should be the Bill of Rights, right? Yes, the Bill of Rights. All right, 1791. We already questioned about that as well. Who was the leader of the American Civil Rights Movement and delivered the famous I Have a Dream speech? That is Martin Luther King Jr. So he was assassinated in 1968 in Memphis. He was a huge movement. It's a holiday named after him here in the U.S. as well. States. Which U.S. state was the 49th to join the Union? That is Alaska. 1959, January 3rd. We actually had two states join that year. I already talked about Hawaii in the last quiz, but Alaska was purchased from Russia back in the 1860s. Andrew Johnson and Secretary of State William Seward made that deal. Imagine if Russia still had that today. That would be really interesting. We also got that for a bargain, the last purchase. One of the few good things Andrew Johnson did as president. Who was the first woman to fly solo across the Atlantic Ocean? Well, that's Amelia Earhart. Should be Amelia Earhart. Not too good at aviation history. I need to freshen up on that, but that one's pretty famous. Obviously, we never found her body, so people think they have, and you see stuff in the news all the time about it. But which event led to the United States entry into World War II? Well, that's going to be the Japanese attack on Pearl Harbor, which is in Hawaii, which was the location of the Pacific Fleet in the 1940s. We moved it closer. It was originally in San Diego. Roosevelt moved it closer in 1940 due to a feared attack on the Philippines. Who was the U.S. president during the Cuban Missile Crisis? That's John F. Kennedy. That was 1962. Probably the closest we ever came to nuclear war. And if I was alive in 1962, which I wasn't, I would have been very scared. What was the name of the first American satellite launched into space? That is... Oh, shoot, the first American satellite? I don't know that. I was going to say my grandparents were alive during the Cold War. I was not. I'm sure some people are going to know this. So I know Sputnik was the Soviet satellite. I don't know. Do I have a guess? Yeah, I don't know. I'm going to know it. Store one, I knew that. Yeah, I missed two so far. Who is the first African American to serve as president of the United States? That is Barack Obama, 2009. I remember his presidency. I'm not that young. I remember Obama's presidency. His first president I remember in office. I was born during Bush's presidency, but Obama. Which U.S. president is known for his role in ending the Cold War? Well, you got two answers for this. Reagan is known for his role in ending the Cold War because he had a lot of ties with the Soviet Union and he kind of established the end of it. But when the Soviet Union officially collapsed in December of 1991, it was actually George Bush who was president. They're going to want Reagan, but Bush is the correct answer. But Reagan's technically the right answer because they talk about his role in ending it. Not who ended it, but the role in ending it. And then Gorbachev just died a few years ago. Last year. Who was the commander of the Continental Army during the American Revolution? George Washington. Talked about that. That was pretty easy as well. He's from Virginia. Obviously, he was a commander in the British Army during the French and Indian as well. Ooh, here we go. What was the name of the American pioneer who was famous for exploration of the Western frontier? Well, it's Daniel Boone. I actually have done a lot of research on Daniel Boone. I actually have a family connection to Daniel Boone. I have a lot of ancestors from Kentucky, and I'm actually related to the Callaway family. For those of you guys that, if you've studied Daniel Boone, Western expansion in Kentucky, I'm actually related to the Callaway family. His daughter married a Callaway, one of my cousins, and the colonel. Commander who was with Daniel Boone when he founded Boonesboro, his name was Colonel Richard Callaway. He's my uncle. I was related to his brother, William Callaway, who was in the Virginia House of Burgesses with Washington during the late British colonial days. So I actually have a connection to Boone. Which is kind of interesting. Just fun fact for you guys. Just found that out a couple months ago, like about a month ago. Who was the leader of the Confederate Army during the Civil War? Well, Robert E. Lee is who's here, which is true. The leader of the Confederacy was President Jefferson Davis, which I wonder if he's going to come up with something in this. Who is the name of the women's suffrage leader who played a key role in securing right to vote for American United States? I'm not too good at my women's history, but I think it's Susan B. Anthony. Yep, I could just tell by the picture. Susan B. Anthony. Who was president of the United States during the Mexican-American War? That's James Knox Polk. Very successful president, especially during a time we had a lot of independent presidents. He was only president for one term, 1845 to 1849. He got a lot done. Then he died like 3 months later. He had the shortest retirement of any president. He was 53 when he died. The youngest died of natural cause. Which U.S. president was known for his New Deal policies to combat the Great Depression? That's Franklin Roosevelt. Please don't ask me about the programs because I don't know the programs. You clearly found out with the last one, but that's all right. What event is often considered the start of the American Revolutionary War? Typically the shot heard around the world. Lexington Concord, 1775. Yep, Lexington Concord, April of 1775. What was the Underground Railroad? Well, that was the network to help slaves to freedom, essentially. Oh, it's kind of cool. We got like a map. See, Ohio is very prevalent. I'm at Ohio University right now. I attend college in Athens, Ohio, which is around the southeast part. So there was some Underground Railroad things that went through here. There's actually some Underground Railroad sites in town, which is really cool. A network of secret routes and safe houses. Basically what I said. Who was the first Chief Justice of the United States Supreme Court? That is going to be John Jay. John Jay. First Chief Justice. I had all the Chief Justices memorized at one point. I don't know if I still do, but I did it one time. What was the name of the U.S. mission to land a man on the moon in 1969? That was Apollo 11. We already went into that earlier as well. Go ahead. Sure. Hello? Hello? Okay. Just making sure I was still recording. 26. Who is the Native American woman who acted as a guide for an interpreter for Lewis and Clark? That is the, it's going to be Sacagawea. She's actually on a dollar coin. They put her on a dollar coin. She's one of the most famous Native Americans. Probably second to Pocahontas. That's only because Disney, obviously. What was the 19th Amendment to the Constitution? Women's suffrage, 1920. Already went over that one. Hopefully you guys can see the text here. I'm not covering it up. You guys see the choices. What was the name of the document signed in 1620 by the Pilgrims before they landed at Plymouth? That is the Mayflower Compact, which actually this year we're getting that on a quarter design, which I'm very excited about. That was in 1620, and then obviously you get the first Thanksgiving in 1621. It's one of the first settlements in America, for the English settlements, that is. Spain had been here for a while. What was the main cash crop in the southern colonies during the colonial period? That should be cotton, but there were a lot of them. Tobacco, what? Okay, well, cotton was too. Okay, that was a subjective question. I'll take the L on that. Who served as president of the Confederate States of America during the Civil War? Actually, I already talked about this. Jefferson Davis. What's really interesting about Jefferson Davis, which I don't know if they're going to show his picture. Jefferson Davis, he had a kind of a neck beard. No, he didn't really have a neck. We kind of did. He had like a really weird facial hair down here, whatever. That's not the point. What's interesting about Jefferson Davis is he was the president of the Confederacy, and Lincoln was the president of the United States, obviously, at the time. And not only do they kind of look similar, which they do, they were also from Kentucky, which Kentucky was famously a border state during the Civil War. But you have the president of the United States and the Confederate States, both from Kentucky, which is really interesting. Obviously, Lincoln lived in Illinois for most of his professional life, but he was born in Kentucky. Jeff Davis was born in Kentucky, too. He's buried in New Orleans, though. Or originally, they moved his body to Richmond, Virginia. I've seen his grave, but they originally from New Orleans. What was the name of the first American woman in space? Oh, I know it. Woman? No. What's her name? Oh, I need to freshen up on this space stuff. Oh, the space. I'm not good with the space stuff. Sally Ride. Oh my gosh, I should have known that. That's embarrassing. Ooh, I need to freshen up on my space knowledge. That's for sure. That's what needs to happen. Alright. Anyway, which U.S. president is known for the Emancipation Proclamation? That's Lincoln. Obviously. I can't believe I didn't know Sally Ride. That's crazy. That's crazy. What was the name of the American aircraft that dropped an atomic bomb on Hiroshima? Okay, so you have the boxcar and that's the name of the bomb. I think it was the Enola Gay. Yeah, so those are the names. So the boxcar was Nagasaki. Enola Gay was Hiroshima. I think it was Enola Gay. Boxcar was Nagasaki. Enola Gay, yes. Alright, we're back. What was the name of the American general who became a hero during the Battle of New Orleans, the War of 1812? That's going to be Andrew Jackson. Obviously, he's on the $20 bill. Pull him out right now. This is actually an old 20, but that's him. That's from the 90s. Andrew Jackson. Became president later on. That's where he got his fame. Who was the abolitionist leader who published The Liberator and called for immediate end to slavery? It's pretty obscure. I actually don't know. Who is this guy? Oh, I have many guesses, but I don't. Yeah, I'm gonna take the L. William Lloyd Garrison, man. I haven't studied too much on him. Some of this progressive areas I don't know too much about as much. I need to really... This is kind of giving me an idea of what I need to study for. Maybe we can start doing videos on some of this stuff. Or I'll start doing videos on some space content, because I clearly don't know. I missed like 2 questions on that so far. What was the name of the Supreme Court case that established the principle of judicial review? That is Marbury versus Madison. That was one of the first Supreme Court cases. Chief Justice Marshall, for presided over that one. Yeah, judicial review is something the judicial branch in the Supreme Court does. And during Supreme Court case, which is not in the Constitution, Article 3. So that was something that was added later by the Supreme Court. Who was the American inventor and statesman who is often credited with discovering electricity? Good old Benjamin Franklin. My son. No, I'm kidding. He's not my son. I used to joke around and say that. He was older. He was like 70 when the Constitution was written. Or the Declaration. He was born in 1706. What is the period renewed interest in art, culture, and learning in the United States during the early 20s? The progressive era. Ooh. The Roaring 20s? Roaring 20s. Okay, there we go. I was like, it's not that obvious. It was. Who was the American general who commanded U.S. forces in Europe during World War II? That's Eisenhower's right there. Obviously, just so you guys know, I have not done any of these quizzes beforehand. I would have gotten those ones right had I done that, but I just want to make that clear. I probably should have said it at the beginning of the video, but I have not done this. Seen these quizzes before. These are all blind. Which U.S. president ordered the dropping of the atomic bombs in Hiroshima and Nagasaki during World War II? That's Harry Truman. We kind of talked about that earlier. 100% the right decision to make. We can go into that later in another video, but probably have before. But I do agree with that decision, even though obviously it was horrible. But that was what needed to happen to end the war. What was the major trade route connecting the east coast of the United States, the west coast, during the 19th century? Should be the Transcontinental Railroad. Unless they're looking for a name of a road, to which I don't have an answer. Oregon Trail? No, it wouldn't be the Oregon Trail. It's probably the Transcontinental Railroad. Oh, it is the Oregon Trail. Okay. I said it. I didn't know I thought the Oregon Trail started in like Illinois or Missouri or something. It's not. That was an old game from the 70s. You have died of dysentery. Famously. Who was the African-American woman who refused to give up her seat on a bus in Montgomery, Alabama in 1955? Good old Rosa Parks. She died in 2005, I think. She was in her 90s. Yeah, so she's set a standard there. What was the name of the political scandal that led to the resignation of President Richard Nixon in 1974? That's the Watergate scandal. For those of you guys who don't know what Watergate is, which I didn't know for a while, basically it was kind of Nixon had it as kind of a cover-up. Basically, Nixon's administration was kind of charged with spying over the Democratic National Convention, and then Nixon was involved in a cover-up for that because Nixon was very second-guessing of himself. Nixon was a very good president, in my opinion. I think he was very successful, especially abroad with foreign relations. But he did a lot of things that he shouldn't have because he was kind of feared. And he was a narcissist, no doubt about it. But he was really smart. But he really didn't he was very scared about his self-image, I think. And he was involved with a cover-up for this event, which really led him to really get caught, and it made it look worse on him. And so he ended up resigning out of fear of being impeached. He was not impeached, but he most likely would have been. Who was the Native American leader who resisted U.S. expansion into the West in the late 1800s? Well, there's a couple answers to this. We're going over Western expansion, this class I'm in right now. So we did actually talk about Geronimo, which was down with the Apache, but this is Sitting Bull right here, who was leader of the Sioux. And he was fought at the Battle of Little Bighorn against George Armstrong Custer in 1876, and actually won at the battle, but was eventually was killed in 1890. But while he was being arrested or something like that. But Sitting Bull is typically one of the most famous Native Americans. We should go into that history as well in future videos as well, I think. Which U.S. president is known for the creation of the National Park System? Well, actually, I think it's Grant, but it might be Theodore Roosevelt. I think it's Theodore Roosevelt, but Grant established the first national park. I know I can't pick. I'm going to go with Roosevelt. But if it's Grant, I knew it. Yeah, it's Roosevelt. Okay, Roosevelt is my answer. But the first Yellowstone became a park during Grant's administration, so that's what got me confused. I guess it wasn't an official thing. Who's the American aviator who made the first nonstop solo flight across the Atlantic Ocean in 1927? That's Charles Lindbergh. I actually know that one. I'm not very good with aviation history, but I've gotten them all right so far. I don't know too much about him, but I know who he is. Who was the first African American to serve on the U.S. Supreme Court? Again, this civil rights stuff, I just don't know. I feel like his last name was Johnson? Oh, I've missed that trivia question so many times. What event led to the United States entry into World War I? That's going to be it was a couple things. Right here is the Lusitania disaster, which happened in 1915. I typically don't consider that to be the main reason because that was actually like 2 years before we got involved. We got involved in 1917. The Zimmermann telegram was also a big deal, which was supposedly a message sent from Germany to Mexico, kind of prompting Mexico to attack the U.S. from the southern border. But there's a lot of speculation whether or not that was British propaganda. And today is still interesting conspiracy theory. Lusitania, though. Yep, that's what they wanted. Even though I kind of disagree with that. That's a subjective question. What was the name of the American who founded the Red Cross in 1881? Coleman. I'm going Coleman. I don't know. We need to freshen up our women's history as well. Clara Barton. I don't even know who Coleman is. I don't even know why I'm saying this. Who is the American folk hero who died at the Alamo, the Texas Revolution? The old Davy Crockett. We just did a video on the Alamo as well. 1836 Texas Revolution. Davy Crockett. David Crockett. He's actually, I believe he was a senator from Tennessee. All right, that is it for that quiz. We're going to have one more. Good with those right now. Maybe I can get something right. Who wrote the Declaration of Independence? That is going to be Thomas Jefferson. I already went over that. Actually, I don't think we've done that one yet. We did the Constitution and the Bill of Rights. But it was Jefferson. All three of those men were there, along with two other men as well. What other year was the Constitution ratified? What year was the Constitution ratified? Well, it was ratified in 1787. It wasn't officially ratified until 1789, though, but it was written in 1787. It wasn't officially ratified by all the states by all 13 states until 1789. Who was the first president? That was George Washington. Give me some warm-ups here. John Adams was the second, Jefferson was the third. What war ended in 1865? The Civil War. We're probably warming us up right now. I'm sure they're going to get harder. We got 100 questions. Could be Lincoln. We've had a few repeats so far, so hopefully you guys can remember these. That's going to be the 13th Amendment. Now, these three here are all civil rights amendments. The 14th Amendment guaranteed citizenship to former slaves and African Americans. And the 15th Amendment gave blacks the right to vote. Black suffrage, which that law was obviously very controversial in the South and led to a lot of limits, Jim Crow and things like that. It's part of the Constitution. States declare, ratify who votes. What year did the U.S. enter World War II? 1941 was when we declared war in Japan. 42 is though when we really got into it, though. And then 39 is obviously when World War II started in Europe with Hitler's invasion of Poland. Who was president during the Louisiana Purchase? That's going to be Jefferson. What year was the Bill of Rights added? 1791. 1791. It's a tough question. I'm pretty good with my dates, though. Who was the president during the Great Depression? Well, Hoover and Roosevelt. So, I don't know. I'm going to go, Roosevelt for most of it. Hoover, though, was there at the beginning. The worst part of it. What event started the American Revolution? That's going to be Battle of Lexington. Actually, Lexington and Concord, but that's same thing. Who is the author of most of the Federalist Articles? That's going to be Hamilton. No, Federalist Papers. No, that's Madison. Okay, well, I said it first. Which state was the last to join the Union? That's Hawaii. These are the last three right here. Obviously, there's always been talk about Puerto Rico, but I don't know if that's going to happen. Maybe one day. Who was the youngest elected president? Okay, so this is a trick question. Theodore Roosevelt was the youngest serving president at 42, but John F. Kennedy was elected at 43, so he's the youngest. But the youngest presidential candidate was actually William Jennings Bryan in 1896. He was 36 years old. Had he won, he had been the youngest president probably forever, because I don't know if that one would have been able to beat. But Kennedy, as of now, is the youngest elected president. Theodore Roosevelt's the youngest to serve. What year was the Emancipation Proclamation issued? That is going to be 1860. 1863 is when it went into effect. It was written in 1862, but it went into effect on January 1st, 1863. Yes. Which U.S. president served 4 terms? That's Franklin Roosevelt. He actually died a month into his 4th term. He was elected 4 times, though, but he would have served 16 years as president had he lived through his 4th term. The first Secretary of the Treasury is Hamilton. There we go. Alexander Hamilton. Finally got me a Hamilton question right. There we go. I redeemed myself. What were the other? James Monroe, Jefferson. Now. What was the first U.S. capital? That's actually New York. New York City, yeah. It's where Washington was sworn in. I actually did a little short outside of the building. They have a little statue of him. Right by the New York Stock Exchange. Who was the leader of the Confederate Army? Robert E. Lee. Stonewall Jackson. Yeah, he's an interesting character as well. Grant. Union. Stonewall Jackson was Confederate. What was the first state? What was the first state to ratify the Constitution? That's actually Delaware. Delaware's every state in the Union, for those of you guys that don't know, if you're not from America or if, you just don't know this, every state has a nickname, and Delaware's is the first state. That's their nickname. Who wrote Common Sense? I think that was Thomas Paine. It was an Enlightenment document. Yeah. Who was the first woman appointed to the Supreme Court? I think it was Sandra Day O'Connor. There we go. Get back here. Let's go. That was relatively recently, too. What year did the U.S. land on the moon? 1969. We haven't been since 1972. Who was the U.S. president during World War I? That's actually Woodrow Wilson. He gave the 14 points at the end and tried to get the U.S. to join the League of Nations, which he was a forefather of, but the Senate would not ratify it. What year did the women then eventually fail? What year did women gain the right to vote? 1920. Let's go. Women's suffrage. Who was the principal author of the Constitution? George Washington. But Madison's going to be the answer. Which president resigned? Nixon was the only one to resign. We've had 2 vice presidents resign, John C. Calhoun and Spiro Agnew. Which one of them was actually Nixon's vice president. Who was the president during the Cuban Missile Crisis? Kennedy. We already went over that one as well, John F. Kennedy. What year did the stock market crash during the Great Depression? 1929. I think that one's come up in every quiz so far. Oh, question 29. That's funny. Who is known as the Great Emancipator? That's actually Lincoln. It's got to be Lincoln. The Great Compromiser is Henry Clay, though. Wonder if he's ever going to come up. Who wrote the Star-Spangled Banner? That's Francis Scott Key during the War of 1812, the bombing of Fort McHenry, 1814. He was on a ship during the battle. That's why you get, and the rockets, red glare bombs bursting in air. That's where that comes from. What year was Pearl Harbor attacked? 1941. December 7th, 1941. Who was the first African-American Supreme Court Justice? Thurgood Marshall. All right, we're going to redeem ourselves on this. Never going to forget that ever again. What year did the Berlin Wall fall? 1989. It's not really American history. That's like German history. I guess it pertains to America, U.S., but okay. Who was president during the Gulf War? That is George H.W. Bush. Although the second Gulf War was George W. Bush, but George H.W. Bush, 1990. Operation Desert Storm, Desert Shield. Desert Shield, then Desert Storm. What year did the U.S. purchase Alaska? 1867. William Seward. Who was Secretary of State? Who was the first president to live in the White House? That's actually John Adams. Washington did not live in the White House. Washington, D.C. was not built yet at the time of Washington's presidency. And at the time, it was just called the Executive Mansion. I don't believe it was called the White House till Taft's administration. What is the oldest military academy? Gotta be West Point. Yep, it's the main one here in the U.S. What was the first vice president? John Adams. Who was the first vice president? John Adams. I gotta make sure I'm not talking too much. He's going by quick. Who led the Underground Railroad? Probably Harriet Tubman is probably the answer they want. That's kind of a hard question to say, but Harriet Tubman herself was a slave who helped a lot of escaped slaves. She herself escaped. Although Frederick Douglass was a huge influence for it as well. But Harriet Tubman's probably the answer they want. Yeah. There we go. What year did the U.S. enter World War I? That is 1917. There's actually a movie about that. I watched it on the plane to Germany. It was kind of scary. It was actually just called 1917. Who was the president during Louisiana Purchase? Jefferson. We already had that question. I keep saying what for who? Who was the president during the War of 1812? That's Madison. Madison actually, which is interesting about the Constitution, one of the roles of the president is to be commander-in-chief of armed forces. Madison, during the War of 1812, led troops in battle just outside of D.C. And actually is the only president to command troops in battle as president, which is pretty freaking bad, a word I don't want to say, but that's pretty cool. Who was the first Chief Justice of the U.S.? That's John Jay. Already had that one as well. Taney and Marshall were later on. Yeah, so Madison, that's one of the coolest things Madison did. Any president's done. What was the 19th Amendment ratified? 1920. This one seems to come up in all the quizzes as well. Pretty influential, though. Who was the only U.S. president to serve more than 2 terms? That's Franklin Roosevelt. He was the longest serving president and will always forever hold that record unless they change something, which I don't know if they will. He served 12 years as president, 1933, 1945. 1803. Louisiana Purchase. From France, from Napoleon. Who was the president of the Civil War? Lincoln. I went back. Okay. All right. We're going to do that. Lincoln, okay. That is Andrew Johnson, the first president to be impeached over the Tenure of Office Act. He tried to fire Secretary of War Edwin Stanton. And Johnson was also very unpopular. Very bad. Very detrimental president. 1776. Pretty easy. Surprised that's number 50. Should have been like one of the first ones. Who was the president during the New Deal? Franklin Roosevelt. That was his program. Please don't ask me about any of the programs. What year did the first perfect score in the first one? What year did the first manned moon landing occur? 1969. I knew that. We already had that one. I think I've missed 2 this quiz. Who is the main author of the Declaration? Jefferson. We're getting a lot of repeat questions here. Let's get something new. 1787. We already had that one. That one. That's the last one. Who was the president? Okay, James Polk. Oh, here we go. All right, 1991 is when, 1990 sometimes we say, but 1989 is when the wall fell, but this was also subjective. I think we consider the Cold War to end when the Soviet Union collapses, which was in 1991. Yes, okay. Who was the first president of the Continental Congress? Ooh, interesting. Ooh, I don't know. Peyton Randolph's coming out at me. There we go. I don't know. I guessed. I freaking guessed on that one. I have no idea. Who was the first president to be assassinated? Lincoln. Garfield, McKinley, and Kennedy were also assassinated. We've had 4 presidents be assassinated. And we'd have Theodore Roosevelt and Trump had been shot. They lived. And neither of them were actually serving as president when that happened. Oh, and Reagan as well. Reagan, Trump, and Theodore Roosevelt have been shot. But Trump and Roosevelt weren't president when it happened. They were campaigning to come back. Trump was successful. Roosevelt was not. And then Reagan was obviously almost died, but he lived and he got shot. What year was the U.S. Civil Rights Act passed? That's 1964. That's actually not... 1968 is when the big one passed, but 1964 was the first one that Kennedy had tried to get through before he got assassinated. Who was the first woman to fly solo across the Atlantic? Amelia Earhart. I got that one as well. There's Bessie Coleman. I knew she was something to do with aviation. What year did the Wright brothers make their first flight? 1903. Kitty Hawk, North Carolina. December of 1903, I believe. Who was the president during, or November, when I was here? December. Spanish-American War, that's William McKinley. One of the biggest factors, driving force for imperialism in the U.S. What year did the Prohibition begin? That's 1919. 1920! Okay, the 18th Amendment was passed in 1919. What's going on here? Maybe it didn't go into effect until 1920. Who was the first African-American woman elected to Congress? Ooh. I thought it was, Jeanette. Ooh. I think it's Carol Braun. Shirley Chisholm. Really? I thought it was Jeanette forgot her last name. What year was the first Super Bowl play? That was 1967. Green Bay Packers, I think, won that. Actually, Super Bowl Sunday is, I think, tomorrow, if you guys are watching this when it comes out. Who was the first American to orbit the Earth? John Glenn from Ohio. Also is Neil Armstrong. What year did the Vietnam War end? 1975 is when it ended. Let's see. Yeah, I was talking about the Super Bowl. Fun fact, every single year since 2005, if you count like the next year of the Super Bowl, the Seattle Seahawks have been in the Super Bowl every single year that a pope has been elected. Since 2005. Or 2006, I guess. So that's a fun fact. Who was the first U.S. Secretary of State? That's Jefferson. None of the others served as Secretary of State. Hamilton was Secretary of the Treasury. John Jay was Chief Justice. What year was the first televised presidential debate? I think it was 1960. Nixon and Kennedy. I've actually seen that. It's a really sophisticated. It's really good. Who is the U.S. president heat election to? Is the U.S. president of the first Gulf War? That's George H.W. Bush. Into his grave recently. What year did the U.S. enter the Korean War? That is 1950. 1950. Because that is when North Korea invaded South Korea on June 25th. The war is technically still going on today. It was only a ceasefire in 1953, July 27th, 1953, obviously. Who was the first American woman in space? That's Sally Ride. All right, redeem myself on that one. Sally Ride. We're just ingraining these in here. What year did the U.S. host the Summer Olympics in Los Angeles? Ooh, I actually don't know. I'm going to go 84. Let's go. That one rang a bell. It's kind of a guess. It was an educated guess. That's what I'd call that. Who was the first president to appear on television? That is, it should be Roosevelt. Yep. It's around that time. What year did the U.S., I think it was 1939. What year did the U.S. Supreme Court, Brown v. Board I was going to say that. I was going to say 54. But I just need to stop talking because you don't get much time for these questions. Who was the first president to visit China? It's Nixon. Nixon opened relations with communist China. That was a huge deal at the time. Nixon was very successful. What year did the U.S. sign the Paris Agreement on climate change? It's going to be the Obama administration. Let's go 2014. 2016. See, we started. That's actually the year I started. Remember that year. Started this channel that year. What was the first president born in a log cabin? I guess it's Lincoln. Most of the presidents before Jackson. That's right. It was Jackson. Oh, I missed the presidential question. That's true because all the presidents before Lincoln were pretty much wealthy, inherited their property. But Jackson was the first president of the common man. That's true. What year did the U.S. host the Winter Olympics, so they say? Lake Pass. Go 1976. 1980, wow. The Winter Olympics, okay. I'm falling apart here, guys. I missed like 2 in a row. Who was the first president to die in office? William Henry Harrison. 31 days in office. Oh boy, that's not very long. Imagine that happened today. What year did the U.S. host the Summer Olympics in Atlanta? That's 1990. It's the 90s, I know that. Ooh. I'm going to go 92. What? Who is the first president to live in the White House? These Olympics questions. Adams, we already did that. Did they already have that? They already had that in this quiz, or was it the last quiz? We acquired the Philippines in 1898. Should have. Okay. Then we get the Philippine-American War in 1899, 1902. Who was the first U.S. president to visit the China? To visit the China. Richard Nixon. We already had that question. A repeating question. To visit, it's not China. Who's the first U.S. president to visit the double-spaced China? It's interesting. What year did the U.S. celebrate its bicentennial? 1976. This is the semi-quincentennial this year. 2026. That's 1976. 200 years. Who was the first president to be impeached? That's Andrew Johnson. We already had this? We already had these questions. We had these questions. 1917. We already... What? What is going on here, guys? We already had these questions. I'm pretty sure on this quiz, too. There we go. Who was president during the Vietnam War escalation? Mainly Johnson. Gulf of Tonkin incident, 1964. Kennedy... When Kennedy was president, we were pretty much just sending ambassadors over to Vietnam, and then Nixon pulled troops out. What year did in 73, Vietnamization. What year did the U.S. host the World's Fair in New York? We're going to go 64. Let's go. It's been answered a lot of questions. Nixon, I think we already had that one as well. Richard Nixon, first president to resign. So far, the only. What year did the U.S. acquire Alaska? 1867. We already had that. What is with these repeat questions? Going on? Give me a new one. Oh, who's the first president to appear on a coin? Interesting. It's actually Lincoln. Because before Lincoln, it was all just either Lady Liberty or Native Americans. It was Lincoln in 1909 for the centennial of his birth. I don't think that's right. Who was the first president to appear on a coin?
Abraham Lincoln was the first president to be featured on a coin in circulation.
Yeah, I think maybe a commemorative something. What year did the U.S. enter World War II? 1941. We already had these questions. Who is the first U.S. president to live in the White House? John Adams. That's the third time we've had that question. This quiz, man. I really want you to know John Adams was the first president in the White House. What was the U.S. Olympic... Okay, Salt Lake City. I think it's 2000. 2006. 2002. Yep. Okay, I changed my answer. It's 2002. Who was the first president to win the Nobel Peace Prize? That's Theodore Roosevelt for his involvement in the Russo-Japanese War. 1905 treaty. Which is kind of interesting. What people know about that. What year did the U.S. host the Summer Olympics in St. Louis? 1900, I don't know. Who was the first American to receive a patent? Franklin? I feel like it's Franklin. Franklin had patents. Unless we're not counting him as an American. Samuel Hopkins. Man, I'm screwing up bad. Constitution took effect in 1789. Okay. Last question, please don't be a repeat. It's Peyton Randolph. It was a repeat. All right, guys, I want to wrap this up here. Sorry for the dark lighting right now. It's not the best, obviously, recording studio. But that was a fun little video. I don't know what, regardless of what happened with the questions there at the end being all the same, I don't know what happened to that. But this was a fun video. So let me know if you guys want to see us cover anything else like this in the future. I think it'd be kind of fun to do a live stream of a trivia. Maybe world history or geography or something like that. That'd be kind of cool. But this year is going to be full celebration for the United States 250th anniversary semi-quincentennial. I highly recommend and encourage everyone watching this video, if you live in the United States, to go out in your communities this year and celebrate whatever that means to you, because this is a big year. So I'm really excited to be a part of this as a history content creator on YouTube. I got a lot more videos coming out about this in the coming months, and I'm really excited. This is going to be a big year. So with that all said and done, be sure to comment, like, and subscribe, and we'll see you guys next time. Goodbye.